The ruthless war in Ukraine continues for the 23rd day now. In Rivne, in western part of Ukraine, the Russians shelled a TV tower. Casualties grew to 21 people killed, 9 injured. The Russian troops shelled a column of civilians who were being evacuated from Mariupol to Zaporizhia from BM-21 Grad, a rocket launch system. On the 16th of March, Russians bombed a drama theater in Mariupol with a huge sign "Children," where thousands of people were hiding. The same evening at 6 p.m., the theater was assumed to schedule a performance of the play A Disagreed and Unconquered. Instead, the ruins and many lives probably buried underneath. Since the beginning of the war, 108 children have died in Ukraine, and more than 120 have been injured. More than 3 million people have already fled from Ukraine to other countries. We asked them, mostly women with children, to share their stories with us. This is UA, the day that we survived. Ukrainian journalists have come together to create it with real people who record themselves and send us their stories. The Council of Europe has officially excluded Russia after 26 years of its membership. Ukraine became a member of the energy grid of the European Union. From now on, Ukrainian electricity flows to Europe, and the European to Ukraine. Ukrainian railway company continues to operate. Since the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, 2.5 million people have been evacuated by train from the hotspots of our country to the safer western regions.
Dear passengers, your attention please. Train 13, Kyiv-Solovino is on track number 10. Carriage number starts from the west side of the station.
Шановні пасажири, продовжується посадка на регіональний експрес номер 790.
Два місця зверху. Так, почекайте. Два чоловіка ще все купе. Ви тут присядьте, там розберетеся. Хто зверху, забирайте культуру. Два місця. Отут купе. Так, 3 знизу, по одному зверху.
Alyona Kuchar had to leave Kyiv, while her mother stayed back. This is her story.
Hi, my name is Alyona, and I'm a Ukrainian refugee staying in Berlin with my 6-year-old son Yakiv. We evacuated from Kyiv on the 3rd day of the war escalation, and my mother stays in Kyiv. In Kyiv we live nearby in one neighborhood, and now she looks after our flat and our cat and goes from her flat to ours and spends her nights in air raid shelter, listening to sirens during the day as well. I remember the morning of February 24th when I woke up half an hour before the bombs because I had a dream about the war. In my dream, I saw people running with blankets and bags to the forest, looking back at something behind them in horror and crying, terrified. So when in half an hour I heard the sounds of the rockets, which I will never forget, I understood what's going on, and I also saw people, our neighbors, packing and living in their cars almost right away. I didn't prepare. I had my documents, passport, and my kids' birth certificate packed, along with a bottle of water and some biscuits, and that was all. I refused to recognize that the war in Kyiv would be impossible for the kid to stay in the city for 3 days. So we spent those 3 days in shelter. We took a mattress and blankets and some books and toys and even my son's roller to the basement. Actually, it is a big parking spot under the building because the house belongs to a newly built complex apartment complex, and there were a lot of people during those 3 days, but every day and actually every hour we could see people packing and living in their cars. And for the time being, there are 32 families staying in the parking spot together with my mom. Those 3 days are impossible to forget because I had to rush to the flat and cook warm food for my kids, and then rush back because the sirens were constantly heard. And we decided to evacuate in a couple of minutes because our neighbor texted me. She sent me a message that the territory is safe because she managed to get to to Kyiv passenger railway station. So I decided that this was the moment, and I had a colleague with his car and gasoline. So he phoned me and said, just take your bag, take 1 or 2 bags, take your kid, and keep talking to me via the phone. Just keep talking, he said. I didn't have the chance to hug my mom, to give her a hug, but my kid had. She ran after us, accompanied us to that car, and we jumped into the car and closed the door and headed off the railway station. We saw the tanks and the block posts, and the kid was sick in that car, and I remember the thought, I will never ever be afraid of my kid getting sick in a car, because it just doesn't matter at all. We got to this station and spent 3 hours in different queues and talking to people and asking where to take the train and where to. And I had no plans. I had 2 small bags. And I was happy to meet my colleague with her mom at the railway station, and that colleague helped us to survive at that station, because it's very, very hard to evacuate with a kid on my own. And now, staying in Berlin and reading the news, I understand that there are millions of single moms who were not single moms before the war, but they had to become single parents after February the 24th. Well, we got to Melnitsky, and another friend helped us to stay for the night and to get to Mukachevo the day after. And another almost virtual friend of mine gave us a flat to rest and to get warm and to eat food. So we spent 3 or 4 days there. I do not remember it correctly, because if someone asked me what day it is today, I couldn't say. Mukachevo's volunteers were very helpful, and they organized buses that took us to the border with Hungary. And German volunteers took us at the border from that side and got us to Kassel. And a friend of mine who lives in Berlin rushed by car to Kassel in Germany and took us and got us to Berlin. The road was very difficult, because we spent the night in this bus and the kid had no place to sleep. But the emotional state of mine was dedicated to getting somewhere. I almost got numb, and I had no emotions, actually. I knew that everyone could come up to me and take me by the hand and say, let's go there or there, and I would say okay, because it was almost impossible to plan. And I had this advice from another colleague of mine. She said, you should have a plan for 3 hours, and that's all. We are in Berlin now, and there are a lot of Ukrainian volunteers who live in Berlin and who organized classes, free classes for Ukrainian children, football, sport, singing, and just hanging around at a playground. There are also special doc files explaining to the Ukrainians what to do and where to go, because German bureaucracy is well known all over the world. It is really difficult to combine working online for my institution and taking care for the kid and adapting him for the new reality. The only thing that he's interested in still is coming back home, and this is the very thing that occupies my mind at the moment. I cannot plan anything, but I have to plan. One friend of mine wrote a Facebook post that the situation seems as such. You have to make a life-changing decision, but you do not have the resource to wash your head instead.
Some Russians cynically claim that Ukrainians are moving to Europe not because of the war, but because now they're able to. But in fact, nobody wants to be forced to leave their home. Every day, missiles hit residential multi-story buildings in Kyiv. Messages are flowing from all regions. Casualties are inevitable. The people who have been saved are coming out to the streets to observe how their life is burning down. Everything they had remains in the burned apartments. Would Kyivans rather stay home? Yes, but it's not safe, and especially hard for children. Marina Balaban owns a house in Brovary, close to Kyiv. Her family with 3 kids had to leave their home.
Мене звати Марина.
My name is Marina. I am from Kyiv, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and Brovary. I have lived in all of these cities for the last 30 years, so each one is dear to me and my soul is hurting. On February 24th, the beginning of the war caught me at work. I work as a final editor of a morning show on one of the most popular TV channels in Ukraine. I was on my way to work in a taxi at 4 in the morning when I read this message about Putin's appeal to Russians. Here, as they say, it began. I realized it was it.
Як то кажуть, почалось. Я зрозуміла, що це воно.
As soon as we arrived at work, the presenter went on the air without makeup or prepared texts. 6, 7, 8 hours. I did not count how much time passed.
Я не рахувала, скільки то пройшло часу. Ми просто гнали
We were informing people, streaming from different cities, showing everything that happened in Ukraine.
в Україні. Тоді якось
Then my brain completely shut down somehow. Yes, I saw on the screen what was happening, but I did not take it personally. I understood that in each of these 4 cities I have relatives and friends.
розумію, що в кожному із цих 4 перелічених міст в мене є рідні, близькі люди.
My children and my husband were in Brovary at that time, a town near Kyiv. I called them, of course, and they said they also heard bombs, but so far nothing had happened.
Але нічого такого надприродного не відбувається. Так, бахає, діти трохи.
The children were scared.
Коли я закінчила свій шматок роботи, вийшла.
When I finished my work and went home, I finally understood what was going on. Sirens were on in Kyiv. People were walking along the roads. All the cars were in a big traffic jam. I saw kilometers-long queues at gas stations.
Кілометрові – це не перебільшення. Кілька кілометрові черги були до заправок. В машинах були коти.
There were children, cats, dogs, some things, pillows, baskets, well, everything in the cars. People were already sitting and lying in the subway, afraid of the possible bombings.
Бомбардувань, які можуть відбутися, але Київ ще
But Kyiv has not been bombed yet. When I got home, I saw the 3 of my children were playing war. They shouted air, fell against the walls, and covered their hats with their hands. Then I realized that something had to be done about it, that the children should not see it. We left Kyiv on the evening of February 25th, the second day of the war. We managed to do that just a few hours before the complete closure of the bridges from the left to the right banks. We took things for literally a couple of days. We went to my friend's house who was in the United States at that time. She called me and said that she got a house from her grandmother and that it was somewhere in the woods in Vinnytsia region. We did not take the best things because we understood that we were going to an empty house in the village. We took just a bag of stuff for a couple of days. We planned to leave our children there with their godmother's parents and return to Kyiv to work. Turned out that in a fortnight we crossed half of Europe. First, we drove to Vinnytsia region, then we went to Kosiv in Ivano-Frankivsk region because it was still safer there than in the center of Ukraine. When the airport of Ivano-Frankivsk was bombed, we realized that nowhere in Ukraine would be quiet. I will repeat once again that I have 3 children. The eldest boy has a disability, cerebral palsy, and this is not the case that he'll be able to sit in a bomb shelter. We even will not have enough time to get there. He's very emotional and he would not let anyone sleep there. He would annoy absolutely all children. I believe that if there is an opportunity to leave, you should leave. I can be blamed for that. From Kosiv in Ivano-Frankivsk region, we reached the border with Romania, the crossing point Diakove. We were lucky to stay at the borderline for only 3 hours because it is not the most popular checkpoint. We arrived in Romania where our trip to Europe began. We didn't stay there for a long time because we had nobody there. In fact, we have no relatives, acquaintances, or friends anywhere in Europe. However, this situation made us understand how open the world is, how good people are, and how ready they are to help Ukrainians in need. We only met good people. A lot of those who gave us shelter, food, and clothes. Absolute strangers brought us household items that were really handy. We are now in the small town of Oberschleißheim near Munich. So far we are staying here. We do not know what will happen next. I have no plans for these 3 weeks. I realize that we cannot plan for more than a day. At least my children do not hear the explosions. That is the most important thing for me.
The destruction of Ukrainian cities continues. Every day the Russian troops bombed Chernihiv, Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Rubizhne. On the 16th of March alone, more than 50 civilians died in Chernihiv. The Russian occupants shot at the line of people waiting to get bread. At least 10 people are known to be killed there. Ukrainian creative community and music production Roger Leo and 7CS composed the anthem of Russia. From the sounds of explosions and shellings the Russian military unleashed on the whole territory of Ukraine. Three million people have moved abroad, and there are millions of those who moved from home to other, safer places. The internally displaced people are impossible to count. However, nowhere is safe in today's Ukraine. Different cities are being attacked in different regions. Air raid alarms blare in all regions every day. Anya left her hometown, Zhytomyr, where her entire family has stayed. This is what she tells about her journey.
My colleague wrote in a working chat about organizing a group to go to the Polish border. I offered this to a friend of mine and she also joined me, although hesitantly. My parents refused to go and stayed at home with my brother. In my opinion, it is more difficult for older people and people who are tied to their homes and hometowns to make this decision.
Їм складніше вирішитися на такий крок, щоб їхати.
The trip was organized by the Baptist Church and was arranged quite well.
Це було досить так зроблено, організовано в сенсі ми зупиняли.
We stopped in different cities where locals treated us to tea and food and then we moved on.
Їжею, і ми рухалися далі, аж так було до кордону.
The border crossing itself took probably 5 hours, so it was not too bad. Everything was normal and tolerable, although it is quite cold in sub-zero temperatures, especially when you're not moving. Still, you can warm yourself up with food and tea. But this is the last thing that worries you at this time, because you only want to go through it and finish as soon as possible.
Все пройти і закінчити. Взагалі, спочатку...
First, after crossing the border, you are taken to a special coordination center where you can warm up, eat, and sign up to find transportation for you. I went to Poland knowing that I could stay for a few days with my acquaintance in Poznań. I was lucky and rented a room there for these few days.
Цих кілька днів знайти тут кімнату, щоб зняти. Також я в університеті.
I studied Polish at the university, so it is easier for me to adapt than for those who do not know the language or have come abroad for the first time.
Як я бачу, так, тим людям, які не знають мову, або взагалі, що теж часто трапляється.
Plus, it's hard to trust everyone who wants to help you or give you something because caution, obviously, is important here, since there are cases of fraud.
Щось запропонувати. Хоча тут обережність теж, звісно, не завадить, так як теж буває.
I know many Ukrainians who are afraid to live in someone's apartment for free because they're constantly nervous and do not know how long they can stay and how comfortable it is for a host.
Нервуєш, не знаєш, наскільки довго ти можеш залишитися, і наскільки це комфортно іншій людині, яка тебе приймає.
So I'm glad to have found this room and not be anxious about my stay.
І немає такого нервового очікування.
I took the necessary minimum of staff to make it easier to cross the border in case I had to stand there for a long time.
Якщо довго потрібно стояти. І зараз доводиться багато.
Now I have to buy a lot of things. The shops have free product packages for Ukrainians.
Пакети з продуктами для українців.
I buy everything because I have such an opportunity, but for others, it is a great chance to get the necessary provision. I communicate with my parents every day. I learn firsthand local news from them, but I also check news media. I used to think about moving, but this is not a situation with which I can be ever satisfied, because nothing that's forced on you can make you happy. This is why I can say that I do want to go home.
Тому що ніщо вимушене не може тебе якось тішити. Саме тому, звісно, я можу сказати, що я хочу назад додому.
Every day more and more Ukrainian cities become unsafe, not just for civilian and military Ukrainians, but also for people who spread the truth from the hotspots to the world. Murders and shootings of journalists are considered serious violation of the Hague Convention and the Declaration, the Geneva Convention for the Protection of Victims of War and its additional protocols, and the Convention on the Laws and Customs of Land Warfare, which provides security guarantees for journalists. But the Russian troops seemed to be indifferent. In 20 days of war, they injured 8 journalists, killed 6, and kidnapped 2. On the 13th of March, Russian troops shot Brent Renaud, an American reporter and a documentary journalist, in Irpin. On the 14th of March, Pierre Zakrevsky, an Irish cameraman from Fox News, and Ukrainian journalist Alexandra Kuvshinova were killed in the village of Horenka, Kiev region. Their car, in which they were traveling with TV correspondent Benjamin Hall, came under artillery fire. Here is another story from a Ukrainian who left her home, but in her thoughts she remained in Ukraine with her loved ones.
My name is Taisa Semenova. I'm 25 years old from Kiev. I'm a journalist with the Kiev Independent. When the invasion began on February 24, I was in Kiev in my apartment where I lived with my aunt. I woke up from a call from a friend who told me that Kiev was being bombed. Then I woke my aunt up, told her that, and in a few minutes we both heard sirens going off. We went to look for shelter in houses nearby. We knew that it's going to be nearby, but unfortunately it was locked. We couldn't go in. So then we came back to the apartment and just hid in a bathroom for a little. And then when the air alert was over, I decided that we need to evacuate to my parents' house, which is in the village nearby Kiev. We grabbed some stuff, cat, and we went to the car to evacuate. But because we lost some time, we already were stuck in a traffic jam for like 5 hours. And usually the road to my parents' house takes only like 20 minutes. So when we finally got there, I think in a few minutes, maybe 10, we had first rockets being fired at Vasilkiv. And it was really scary, I'm not going to lie. I was terrified, and I had done quite a few missiles be fired again and again. And then we started to have our family discussed what is our plan, what we're gonna do. So the question was whether I should go to Poland or whether I should stay with them. I tried to look for some tickets to the west of Ukraine, to Lviv, for example, but of course it was all sold out. It was quite impossible to get the train ticket. So we just had, dinner. We tried to calm down a little, but then my stepfather told me that I should still go to the railway station and just kind of wait for the announcement of an evacuation train. He told me that he's quite certain that additional wagons are going to be added for the trains to Lviv. So I should just go there and wait. And then I did. So I went back to Kiev, to the railway station, and I waited, I think, until 2 or 3 a.m. next day, when I finally heard the announcement that additional wagons were indeed added to the train to Lviv. Of course, nobody checked our tickets or asked for any money. It was completely free. When I got to the platform, there was a huge crowd. So when I got on the train, I had to stand because there were no places to sit. And the road to Lviv took more than 12 hours, and usually it's only 5. But I think nobody complained because, everybody was so overwhelmed on that train. One fact I forgot to mention is that when I got to the railway station, I had no idea whether I'm going to go to Lviv, but I couldn't leave the railway station even if I wanted to because it was the curfew. So in any case scenario, I had to spend a night on the railway station. But I managed to get on the train to Lviv. Then when I finally arrived there, another air raid alert was. So I went for a shelter and we spent there, I think, 2 hours. After that, I went for the bus station, wondering if I could get any ticket for Poland. Of course, they told me it was all sold out. I decided to, go on the street, get some coffee, and call my mom, tell her I'm at least in relatively safe Lviv. And then she told me that I should try to go to the bus station again in a few hours. Maybe they're gonna add additional bus or something. So I followed her advice, and in an hour I went for the bus station again. They told me that they didn't add any additional bus. However, I managed to get a ticket because in the crowd there was a man who realized that he couldn't leave the country anymore because of the mobilization law. So he just asked whether anyone needs the ticket for Poland. And because I was right next to him, I just told him, yeah, I need it. So I gave him money for the ticket. They changed the name on the ticket to my name. And then I waited for several more hours for the bus. For that moment, I didn't sleep for 2 days. I was so exhausted. I had a huge moral breakdown in the train. I was crying for like 4 hours. The woman next to me, I was really worried about my mental state. She offered me water, but I just couldn't stop, because when you see your mother's face, when she realizes that nobody knows when we're gonna see each other again, whether we're gonna see each other again, I think that was the hardest moment during the whole war for me personally. So yeah, I was exhausted, but I still decided that I couldn't sleep, because if I do, I might miss my boss. So I just, trying to hold it up. And when the bus finally arrived, I got there. Many people asked the driver to allow them, to be going to the border standing, no matter how, but just asking him to allow to be on that bus. I think he had to decline the majority of those requests. However, he did allow some of families, women with children, to be going with us at least to the border. And then the road took. I honestly don't know how many hours, because I almost at that very moment we finally started our move to the border. I fell asleep, and then I woke up at 6 a.m. next day, and we were in the line on the border on the Ukrainian side still. And I woke up, I saw this huge line. I think it was several kilometers long, but I'm not sure how many. So we just, been waiting, and then when we finally entered the Polish side of the border, but we still haven't crossed it, no stamps. We were met by many volunteers. They brought us, hot drinks, water, food, anything basically that we possibly could be needing. And I crossed the border with Poland, I think around 8 p.m. that day. So it took relatively not that long, because I started my evacuation pretty early in the war. So on February 27, I was already in Krakow, Poland. My friends, friends of friends, met me there, and I was staying with them for some time. Then I went to Peremyśl to make some reporting for the media I work at, and then I was back in Krakow, where I'm currently at. I think the hardest part for me emotionally is that I had to leave my parents behind and evacuate on my own. My stepfather joined the Territorial Defense Forces. My mom refused to leave without him, obviously. So I'm here on my own, and even though I'm here in Poland in safety, I can't stop thinking about how I don't know where the next high-precision Russian missile lands. An orphanage, a maternity hospital, or my parents' house. So mentally, I'm still with them. I'm still living it every day.
There are hundreds and thousands of such stories. Unfortunately, some people have nowhere to return. The Russians destroyed their homes. Somebody lost their loved ones forever. We are grateful for all countries taking Ukrainians in and helping us, but hospitality, however warm, would never replace home. A familiar window view, neighbors resting on the bench near the entrance, a coffee house, and a store nearby. A familiar commute, a running route around the neighborhood. We all want to return back home, and we hope this day will come as soon as possible.